So we will go to the collaborative model, business model. Mike, come on up. Mike DeRay. A reminder to the committee, we have a closed session item on this, and this is the next logical step in the work that we did last year about talking about a CalSTRS collaborative model and what it potentially could be. So this is a general overview and open session, and then we'll hear in more detail in closed session about what this potentially could mean for real estate going forward. And we have Taylor from RCLCO, our real estate consultant, who will opine briefly after Mike's presentation. Mike?
Okay, well, I'll be brief. Excuse me. Thank you. Obviously, this is the fourth meeting we've had about the collaborative business model, and we keep changing the name, so I know that has caused some confusion. We've talked about it being a direct model. We've talked about being control relationships, hybrids come into play, and now collaborative. And I think we've chosen the term collaborative because it really is all encompassing, and I think it works for all the asset classes. But as you're going to find out after you see real estate, and we can move on through Paul's team and also with infrastructure and with private equity, everyone looks at it slightly differently. But for us, I think real estate has had an advantage in the marketplace to putting together direct or collaborative business models because it's been around for a long time as an institutional investment opportunity, certainly longer than the other asset classes or in the private sector. And doing all these different kind of structures have been there for a while as well. In addition to that, the real estate team has been able to do these type of investments in part because of what has happened in the past has come from the investment committees in the past to give more discretion to the staff. And that would be to Chris Ailman, and Chris Ailman adding that discretion to the investment team. So we were able to get more done and do these things because of discretion. We had the ability to do what we wanted to do with certain different investment types and the flexibility to perform those. So we appreciate the changes been made in the past for us to be able to do these type of investments. So with that, I don't want to go much into the history. I think it's there, but I would say that what we have found is that the additional flexibility where we've made we've come to understand is that additional flexibility has required a lot more staffing than what we had anticipated as we've been gone through this. So one thing that came out in the February item when we had the group that came and spoke, Mr. Munk, I believe, and the folks from the Canadian systems, is that focus on your strengths. And what we did going through this, and we also had RCLCO help us with this, is actually take a deeper look into what we do and how we do it. And that self-introspection has had brought up a lot of better understanding of what we really bring to the marketplace. And so the overall goals is always to increase our risk-adjusted returns, and through that we can lower costs. But what we found in looking at this and talking to the marketplace is, what do we bring to the table? And what we found is that capital gets you in the door. So groups like CalSTRS has the advantage of having a significant amount of capital, and that brings you to the table in any discussion with potential partners. What we found is the continuity of that capital really gets you in a situation where you can partner with the best in class out there. And by what I mean by that is that if you can show that you will continuously bring capital to the marketplace with these partners and good investment opportunities, that is very advantageous to them. And simply put, that keeps them from going out in the road and having to raise capital. Most investors, as you would expect, just want to do what they do. They don't want to go out and market and raise capital. They want to do deals. And if you can find a connection of the type of deals that you want to get done as an investor and a good operating partner, and as you grow, that continuity of capital brings the biggest value to both partners. Also, our reputation. We started out with a good reputation. CalSTRS has always had a good reputation in the marketplace, although I've been here for 18 years. I would say for the first 8, we had to explain that we were not CalPERS. Because CalSTRS historically has been fairly quiet. They don't get out in the paper much, and as a general statement, we're still that way. But CalSTRS' reputation as an organization is very strong in the marketplace. We hope that CalSTRS' reputation in real estate has also contributed to that. We hope that our reputation has been that we understand what we're doing, we're open to complex strategies, and we're willing to be quick in our decision making and open to new ideas. Then also our staff continuity and experience has been a big deal. I have been here for 18 years, proudly been here for 18 years. I think Chris has as well. Our senior investment staff has been here somewhere between 14, or the portfolio manager between 14 and 20 years, actually. Some has preceded me. That has also been very helpful in us to create these relationships over time. The people on the other side of these relationships want to know who they're talking to and are going to continue to talk to. So by being able to keep and retain good employees, that's also been very helpful for us to create these relationships. And again, I want to point out that flexibility with investment structures. The market has moved and changed, and us being able to learn these investment structures has been very helpful. There are consequences to that. We do need a lot of help from legal. We spend a lot of legal money. We spend a lot of consulting money because we have to get up to speed on that. And so going into different investment structures is difficult. Also, once we form these structures and make more decisions at the individual level and hold assets as assets, not into large funds. So instead of holding 20 assets in a fund, we might report on these assets individually. That adds a lot of work to our operations team. That adds a lot of work to the appraisal market. That adds a lot of work to the audit teams that we do this. So there are additional costs that come with doing these investment structures. On INV 218, I do want to emphasize something that's very important. Most of the work that we've done in this on that top chart has been in the core portfolio. Doing more direct investing, doing more collaborative investing is also better suited for lower risk strategies. And I think you'll see that as the other asset classes come and talk with you about this. It makes sense that the lower risk investment strategies are easier to encompass within the staff's decision making. And so most of our work to date has been in the core portfolio. We're doing more in value add and a little bit in opportunistic as well. One thing I want to point out on that page is the returns. There's a lot of information there, but if you look at that, what has happened over time is as we put more money into these structures and more time into these structures, the returns have increased over time. We like to focus on the core portfolio because that's where most of our work has been done. And you can see the spreads have gotten better and better over time as we've gotten better at this. This is a chart that's on INV 220. We added something to this chart, and we have been doing collaboration for a while, and we are open to admitting that not everything we has done its work, so we kind of tried to focus on what its successful collaboration is. And these arrows should probably go both ways. The trust and continuity and expertise with tools, which I already talked about, has to go both ways. The team here at CalSTRS has to have the trust with the operators they have as they do with us. And also, we want to see continuity. We have left certain relationships because they've had significant changes in their team. And so if they don't show the continuity of team and we can't get comfortable with the new team they put in place, then obviously we have the ability from the control we put in place to move on. And they want to see the same things with us. What is the result of that is what is added to this is that I didn't point out as much in the item is the exclusive deal flow, what we hope is higher risk-adjusted returns, and obviously we've shown that we can reduce fees. The increased control gets more and more the more investments you do in these strategies. So that is also important, and that arrow goes back as well as not that the control gives us that we're making every decision, but by having more significant collaboration and understanding of our partners and their expertise, we're able to create more vehicles and do more with those better partners in the marketplace. So I don't want to repeat all the conclusions that we come from this. We have had success with this. We have had success with this in the lower risk strategies. We want to continue that. We believe we need more resources, not just at the staffing levels, but in other aspects of how we invest. We need to look at the ways that we make decisions and the way things that happen around the decision making and the structure and the process that we make decisions. And we know that will affect not just what CalSTRS real estate needs are, that would also affect what we need, as I pointed out before, what we might need from operations, from legal and consulting as well as we move forward. We'll be coming back in September with more details of the strategies and things that we want to pursue. and some specific recommendations that will come from the CIO with respect to what needs we will have to request from the board.
Thank you, Mike. A reminder, we'll be getting into greater detail in closed session, but I would like Taylor to speak in general terms in terms of the direction of what Mike just commented on and this item itself, and then join us in closed session for some of the more detailed, nuanced aspects of this. Taylor, and then we'll get to committee members. Taylor.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Quick comments, I think. First of all, I think Mike did a good job outlining both the strengths as well as the advantages of the collaborative model as he sees it. And we can attest as a new member of the team that CalSTR's reputation is in the industry as he described, that this is an opportunity for the CalSTR's real estate team. And it's a unique opportunity based upon the scale of the portfolio, the experience of the staff, the continuity, and their flexibility and creativity in terms of structure. Again, as Mike discussed, the team has experience with this approach. RCLCO also has experience with this approach as well for the last 6 years. In particular, we have worked with another state public pension plan in basically reorienting their portfolio from what was essentially 100% allocated to commingled funds, or where they had entirely outsourced the discretion of their investment portfolio to outside managers, to one in which they've now are implementing what CalSTRS calls the collaborative model on 65% of their real estate portfolio. So meaningful shift over a period of 6 years. And that experience in implementing and then observing the benefits of that have led us to, again, understand the benefits, but also understand some of the implications. And Mike outlined the benefits. I'll highlight what we see them as. And one thing that really can't be underemphasized is the benefit of control over investments, both going into investments, getting out of investments, but also making important asset management decisions around investments, such as financing, important discussions regarding leasing, what capital to expend on buildings, and so on. Another benefit, transparency, is very important. It not only helps you make better investment decisions, it makes you a smarter real estate investor, as it allows you to see market factors, performance factors that just help you make better decisions across the board. And then, very importantly, not to be underemphasized or lower, but really more aligned fee structures in collaborative systems. Fee structures that make it so that the manager does well, gets paid when the investor gets paid, and not the other way around, which can be the case in some of the more commingled strategies. What staff is suggesting is both consistent with some of our high-level recommendations from our first report to the board in May. It's also feasible based upon, again, their experience in already implementing this, the attractiveness of this model to CalSTR's existing managers in which it's partnered in this structure, as well as potential partners. And the economic story is compelling, which we'll talk about in later detail, and Mike has mentioned before. So going forward, it'll be important for CalSTRS to define specifically what this means for real estate. We'll talk about that more in the closed session, but also in coming months, in order to identify the necessary resources, changes, investments, et cetera. So I'll open up to questions too.
Thanks, Taylor. We'll go to questions or comments from the committee. Frank?
INV 220 to 221 lists a number of benefits from the collaborative business model in real estate. Can you quantify some of those? You did quantify returns, but what about like additional commitments and lower turnover? Is that something that's quantifiable?
Certainly lower turnover has a number of issues of what keeps people in their positions. I personally feel the challenge that we have and that we present for our staff, for myself and the rest of our staff, makes the work more enjoyable. in investing in just commingled funds that had very much limitations to what you could do and what control you had. Was not as interesting, as exciting as when you're forming a joint venture and focused on something. So most of the strategies that say a smaller pension fund has open to them are these more general strategies. When our structure initially was to focus on product type specialization. So when, 18 years ago when we first got here, there were 4 of us, and we each picked an asset class: apartments, office, retail, and industrial. And that focus in and of itself made every one of us just, be able to take a deeper dive into those relationships and form those relationships. And what that did was make it more interesting for the staff. I think that has a lot to do with continuity of staff here at CalSTRS. So I think that can be shown. Certainly, my peer group out there does not have not only the size of staff, by the way, that's also important as well. We have been able to get a larger size of staff. Our peer groups don't usually have the size that we do. But also, we have more continuity within the staff. I think our staff has lasted longer, although I don't have the data, just by conversations. Other things that can be shown here, off-market transactions, I know we get a lot of those. I mean, just by definition, we can see those. How you quantify that would be difficult. I guess that would be a job for the consultant of how to quantify some of these things, because I don't see whatever the other people see in the marketplace. So on those 2, I think we can show that they've come.
Thanks, Mike. Lynn?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for the work on this. And I think that going forward with real estate and infrastructure and private equity, on the controller thinks it would be very helpful that if the role of the board was to change with any of these models, or the board needed to make decision points or authorize some models, that we also include fiduciary considerations in that as well too. And that's just something to keep in mind as we continue to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for the report. It was looking forward to just more discussion on this. So a question about the table you highlighted at the top of INV 218 that focuses on the percentage in CalSTRS controlled structures. We're using a lot of different terms here, volume of or degree of control, collaborative model. Are the existing controlled structures that we have kind of a subset of a collaborative model approach, just on the very simple end of the spectrum in terms of the structure of the relationship? And what we want to talk about is what we need to do to be able to get more opportunity by being able to do more complex transactions?
Yes, it is, and I tried to address that, and I apologize for all the terms that we all use individually. So the real estate team has always used this control structure, and so it would be I would say that's, in our view, that's a subset of what a collaborative model is. For us, the focus of a controlled structure is just something that is not a closed-end vehicle. So where we can make more decisions of the capital coming and going into the relationship, as far as going along the spectrum to making individual decisions of what assets come and go into the relationship, is a control structure. It can go all the way to operating companies, where we can buy and sell operating companies and be involved even with staffing there. But for the bulk of what we think control structures are is where we have a joint venture or separate account, where we're making allocation decisions, and we can also sell the assets and turn off the spigots, if you will, from allocation, and more importantly, also have control of what assets come and go into the relationship.
Thank you.
Karen?
Well, I have a few questions. I guess I'm just trying to understand the collaborative model. I know we had the book to read. I know I took a lot of notes. And then I know that we're doing this in parts. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand is, it seems like you're already doing the collaborative model. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what's confusing to me. So how exactly will the, will the philosophy, or will the way that you're going in real estate continue, or going forward be different than what we had been talking about before? I mean, I don't know if that's a good question or not.
No, I completely understand.
Mike, before you respond, I think Alan wanted to
you want to take that
I
one?
sense that Alan wanted to respond to.
I wanted to jump in.
I was thinking about how to describe it, and effectively, this is an evolution and not a revolution. And this is something that's been evolving over time. It's become more sophisticated. It is a nuanced change. It is not a significant change.
Okay.
In the philosophy and most of the practices, it's just going to be enhanced, and I think it's going to be done in a more thoughtful and direct manner.
Thank
Okay.
you, that's very helpful,
Okay,
Alan.
okay. All right,
Evolutionary, not revolutionary.
yeah,
Nice.
okay, okay.
And now, just about.
Karen, did you have
Okay,
other
yeah, I just
questions?
have a couple of other things. I don't know if, I can't remember what you said about INV 218 and the risk level at the top, that chart. I guess I was trying to understand what it meant by risk level. So somebody's, one of our Taylor and I had been talking about this, and he says that think about it as the core example, the core being a full capacity building. And then he said that, so then the assets managed by CalSTRS is at low risk because 95% are managed internally. Okay?
Let
All
me-
right, okay, let me finish, and then the value add is like the building is half full, and the assets managed by CalSTRS are like 59%, which is at moderate risk. And then the opportunistic was that something like a building needs construction, needs development, and then the assets managed by CalSTRS are 22%, which is at high risk, because external managers are doing that.
I would say
Okay.
that you touched on two of the things, but there's a little confusion there, and I apologize
Okay.
for creating it. So if you would just take your pencil and put above core 8%, and that would be kind of the general return we're trying to get from a core asset, 6 to 8% returns. Because as you stated, as Taylor told you, those are full buildings. There's
Right.
not a lot of occupancy risk. We're not putting a lot of leverage on the assets. This is just basic real estate, and that is the bulk of our portfolio.
Okay.
And 95% goes to what percentage of the relationships we have that strive to do this type of investing are in control vehicles. As you go to the right, value add, as you stated, is where you're trying to add value to an asset. So it might be 50% occupied, so you're taking occupancy risk, and you might take some additional leverage or financial risk by adding more leverage to the asset. But you're trying to get probably between a 10 and 12% return on the asset. And 59% of our relationships are in that area, in the controlled vehicles, where we have these structures where we're making more decisions at the property level. And then on the opportunistic, and this causes some confusion because what we call opportunistic is slightly different than what Margot refers to as opportunistic. For us, what we call opportunistic is the highest risk within real estate. And what those are is, using just the same example, is we're gonna do straight development. We're gonna take the development risk of the asset, we're gonna take the full lease-up risk of the asset, and we'll probably use higher leverage levels as well. Those assets and those type of strategies, and those would include home building and even distressed debt and things of that nature, we're trying to get a 15 to 25% return. At the highest risk levels, only 22% are in control vehicles, and that makes sense because the size of our staff isn't such that we can go out and look at all those opportunities and move as quickly in the marketplace. Using a term that a group that you all know, Blackstone, they are an opportunistic investor. They make significant opportunistic investments around the world. We can't compete with that. We will probably never compete with that. So it still makes sense for us to invest through fund vehicles with Blackstone to do opportunistic investing or higher risk investing, because they're just better at it, and we can't replicate that here in West Sacramento. It's just not gonna happen. So it's a small amount of what we have. We can do development with our development partners. We can do that straight development stuff with local real estate and domestic real estate, but we can't do what Blackstone and some of Lone Star and these distressed debt investors do. We can't replicate that. So what we're saying, and we'll go into more detail with specific strategies in closed session, is we'll take on the lower risk strategies, maybe the moderate risk strategies, but it's gonna be more difficult if we go down the path of trying to take on the highest risk return strategies.
And because of the lower risk strategies, it's done internally, so that's why we have to have the expertise in the staff, and that's where the resources need to be.
Right, and when you take on more of the control, you take on more of the decision-making, and thereby you need more people to make those decisions.
Right, okay.
Maybe another way to think about, and I think Mike did a good job of describing this, but another way potentially to think about core versus value add and opportunistic is to think about the number of decisions that need to be made about the specific investments, as well as the level of expertise that is required to make effective decisions in those areas. So it does make sense for the staff to have begun the journey, potentially, the evolution toward a collaborative model with core type investing. It doesn't require as many decisions or ground level specific expertise regarding construction costs or entitlement challenges in New York City as it does as you get further along the spectrum. But it's an opportunity potentially to move along that spectrum to be discussed.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. We'll have more discussion in closed session. Thanks. Item 11 is the Corporate Governance 3030 proposal. Aisha Mastegi. Aisha? My hope is we'll break about 1 o'clock for lunch and finish our open session, including public comments before lunch, and then we'll have lunch, closed session, and be able to adjourn for the day. Approximately 4 p.m. is what I'm looking at right now. Okay. Aisha, information item, welcome.
Yes. Aisha Mastagni, I'm a portfolio manager in our corporate governance unit, and I'm coming back with our 30 and 30 proposal that we brought in May. We promised that we would come back in at this meeting to talk about our progress over the proxy season. So on INV 223, I want to talk a little bit about our, we have this multi-pronged approach to diversity and inclusion within the investment office. I think that was demonstrated through our students and things that were here. But we also have a multi-pronged approach when it comes to addressing diversity at our portfolio companies. And the chart on INV 223 talks about the various coalitions that we work with in order to achieve greater diversity at our portfolio companies. The first is the 30% coalition, and you can see 131 was the number of companies that we engaged about diversity over the past year. 42 of those companies were affected by the policy that we implemented last year, which said that we were going to take a greater, we were going to hold these boards more accountable by voting against either nominating and governance committee directors or the whole board if they didn't take any action. So out of 131 companies, 42 were affected by that policy. And then if you sort of move to the right, 92 directors that were nominating or governance committee members, and 181 directors that were members of the full board. And so that's sort of how it goes down the list. The Coalition of Four is a group of 4 other institutional investors. The focus there is more about is on the S&P 500 companies. It's more about the refreshment policy because most S&P 500 companies already do have some diversity, but we want to understand how to sort of accelerate that process. And then the last one is the California Initiative, and that's where we're partnering with the UC system and looking at companies that are headquartered in California. To Chris's distinction, there are a lot of companies headquartered in California that aren't necessarily incorporated in California. Our focus is companies that have, big operations here in California. And then the chart below that is just the progress that we've made. I want to emphasize that through all of these initiatives, while the focus is on gender diversity, because that's where we have the most data available, when we're having conversations with these companies, we're also talking about how to improve diversity as a whole and encouraging companies to also help us, which means we need more data around self-disclosure. We need companies to encourage self-disclosure. We need the companies to provide more disclosures in the proxy. And so we're always looking at diversity in total. And then on IMV 224, I just wanted to address some of the challenges that we face in terms of capturing data for ethnicity and sort of actually applying that to our voting practices. It's very difficult. So we're achieving a lot of process with the one-on-one engagements, but it is slow going. It probably doesn't move as fast as we all would like it, but there are achievements.
Thank you, Aisha. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to Aisha and the staff at CalSTRS for their work on this. We've been in fairly constant contact over the last couple of months. As you well know, in November, the treasurer released a letter to this board asking for a look at potentially setting specific goals of 30 and 30 for those companies that we do business with in terms of their representation of women, representation on their corporate boards in terms of ethnic percentages, as well as those in the LGBTQ community. We have, since that time, have started to work and distill what we could possibly do, given some of the legal constraints. Wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, that we just came from Wednesday where the CalPERS board at their offsite specifically invited those who have been working on this issue. It included from the representative from the Executive Leadership Council, representative from Equilar, and a lady who has created her own website that tracks gender diversity on boards. I would hope to be able to share that information with this board. I think it would also be timely if we could ourselves host similar information, and I haven't had a chance to discuss this with Harry yet, but if possible at the October retreat. We can do it in any fashion that this board sees fit, but I thought it was very insightful and very informational for us to receive that content from them as to what they're doing relative to the issue of seeking at least some comparability between corporate boards and trying to better understand how we can get them to be more responsive. So with that, let me just establish, and I've shared these with Aisha, there are 3 general precepts that we would like this board to consider as we go forward on this issue. Again, working in tandem and also working off of the good work that the staff has already done. The first of these involves this board, and in particular, having more direct board involvement and discussion around this issue in terms of where we better understand what it is that we're trying to achieve and can help the staff in terms of outreach to these companies, in terms of trying to use whatever leverage that we might have. And part of that would be that if we could periodically, and if it's annually or more often, I think that would be fine, but host a particular part of the investment committee session that looks at these issues across the spectrum of different parts of diversity, so that make sure that we're in fact in sync with the staff as to what we expect. The second would be, how do we increase the level of accountability from these boards? What we have seen in terms of the evidence supplied both to CalPERS and CalSTRS is that it's very uneven in terms of the information that we receive back relative to their overall diversity. And for that, I think we have to sort of figure out how can we better provide some coverage on this issue so that we're getting a more complete picture of where these corporate boards, in whom we invest, where they sit relative to both diversity on their corporate boards, in the C-suite, in their management levels, so that we just have a better understanding. We don't necessarily have to take action, but I think ultimately we may choose to do so. And on that last point, I think what we'd like to see is establishment of specific criteria that sort of serves as a de facto evidence that, in fact, boards are not being cooperative on the issues that we would hope that they would. So to the extent a board just refuses year after year to respond to any request for information in this field, I think that should be sort of prima facie evidence that they're not going to be good corporate actors. To the extent that they're not making any progress over a number of years, I think we have to take that into account as being, again, prima facie evidence that they're not going to cooperate. And then third, we should be able to look at those who have no corporate diversity whatsoever, corporate board diversity whatsoever, and make it known that we, in fact, expect them to start stepping up to the plate and showing greater levels of diversity. So again, I would hope that possibly in October, we can take this up in more detail and have experts come and tell us ways in which we can address some of these issues. I think Aisha has pointed out a very good one. I think on gender diversity, we have a lot of data that tells us what boards are doing across, not only across the country, but throughout the world in terms of their corporate numbers. It's a little more difficult in these other areas such as ethnic diversity, but I think what I heard on Wednesday was it shows promise for us to be able to collect that data one way or the other. And so I would hope that we would entertain ways to get that information and use it in a very positive fashion. The last thing I'll say is that we believe that it's not just a matter of being punitive or trying to embarrass folks who are not doing a better job. We should also figure out a way to recognize those that are doing a very good job. Hold them up as best practices so that their peers can see that we're recognizing them for a job well done. And I think that will serve in the same way as a method to get them to do what's right and also provide us with the information that we need. I should have started off by saying we believe this because it's been shown over and over that boards that are more diverse produce better results. And that's the basis on which we would pursue some of these initiatives. So I appreciate the time to be able to explain that a little further, and I hope that at a future board meeting we can get into a lot more detail. But again, I mean this only as a compliment to staff. You guys have done a great job, and we would hope to improve upon that.
Yeah, no, well said, Steve. I think the staff has done a terrific job moving the needle on so many of these important issues, the ones that you just elaborated on. And what the challenge is from the Treasurer's Office is to do more, for us to do more, and to think strategically how we can work. You know, we're talking about collaborative model. I think collaboration should begin with us. So we need to collaborate with our staff. I'd like to sit down with Joy and yourself, Steve. I do believe we'll have some time slotted out for the October offsite. So why don't we make it a point to follow up with Joy, flush this out a little bit, work with the staff, and figure out whether or not that would fit into the October offsite, and get into more detail as to what is truly actionable and what we could do. I think it's an exciting challenge for all of us, and I'm open to discussing it further. And the best way to do that, I think, is working with Joy and then the leadership of the board to see what we want to do with that time that we do have at the offsite. It might be on this exact issue.
I appreciate that, Harry. Thank you.
You're welcome, Steve. Lynn?
Thank you. Aisha, I wanted to congratulate you, and I know that especially with the departure of Angie and earlier and during proxy season, you really had a big lift, and I think you've done some great work. And I also wanted to echo what Steve said regarding the offsite session the CalPERS hosted earlier this week. And it was very interesting because Equilar presented, and they talked a little bit about all the different improvements and things that they were doing with the 3D database, which of course CalSTRS and CalPERS had jointly founded quite a number of years ago. So it's very exciting to see that that has taken on a life of its own, and they've done really good things with it. And then the other database provider, Leader Exchange.
Gender Diversity Exchange.
Right, actually called Leader Exchange. I think it's called the Gender Diversity, right. And so what they've done is they've looked at what are companies saying are their goals and how they actually met them. And for the time being, at least, this information is free. So anybody can go on that website, and I think that that would be helpful to use in engagement. It's helpful for us board members and helpful for the corporate boards to see how they stack up against other people. So just food for thought.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. And I think, as we all know, I've learned more and more. You look at what's going on, say, in Japan, what's happening. What does diversity look like in Japan? What does it look like in Holland? What does it look like in the UK? What does it look like here in America? There's this global spectrum. And why so much talk about diversity? It's because the research is clear. The more diverse the group, the better the outcomes. So it's worthy of pursuit and some time, and we'll make it happen. I think we can probably make it happen at the October offsite.
And Harry, I can just echo, I mean, CalSTRS and the staff within the corporate governance, we have an excellent relationship with the folks over at Equilar, and we know Sophie Helios very well too, so we've done other work with her.
Okay, good, thanks. Thank you very much. We'll follow up. Thank you. Look, to council, do we have any information requests? I don't recall us having any.
The only one I may have picked up was on the California Investment Policy 5A was request for further detail in the reporting with respect to the geographic impact of the fund on the state of California to the extent possible.
Thank you. Right. Thanks for catching that. And I'll, okay, thank you. we're bringing back, from today's meeting, we're bringing back 5C in September, and we're also bringing back item 8, the private equity policy revision. The draft agenda for the September meeting is clearly outlined there. I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to add anything, given the time, I don't think we need to. Okay, thank you very much.